today. It is, isn't it? And I like, again, I don't know my expression,
Hey,
I like,
everybody back on?
I like to get yelled at very first thing in the morning. Yeah. Yeah, I like some.
Him to present it in such a way that'll touch our consciences and be with all who are sick and sad and in distress. For we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
I'm reminded often by my wife that I don't smile as much as I should. Last week we were able to worship with my daughter and her husband over at 109 Church of Christ, and the man was leading the song singing Be Happy. He led one verse and he stopped, and he said, if we're going to sing it, act it. I thought that was pretty good, pretty good. Here we are, we're worshiping God, no better place to be. So let's put a smile on our face and be glad that we're here. We're studying from the book of Exodus, and we're in chapter 5 this morning. We will be out again next week because of the gospel meeting, but then hopefully after that we can move along pretty good. We're going to go backtrack just a little bit. We'll start with verse 8. Brian, let's read verses 8 and 9 and bring ourselves up to date on the status of the way the people are being treated right now, Israelites in Egypt. 8 and 9.
Exodus 5, verses 8 and 9. But the quota of bricks which they were making previously, you shall impose on them. You are not to reduce any of it, because they are lazy. Therefore they cry out, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Let the labor be heavier on the men, and let them work at it, that they may pay no attention to false words.
Okay, so let's go and read 10 through 14, please.
So the taskmasters of the people and their foremen went out and spoke to the people, saying, Thus says Pharaoh, I am not going to give you any straw. You go and get straw for yourselves wherever you can find it, but none of your labor will be reduced. So the people scattered through all the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. And the taskmasters pressed them, saying, Complete your work quota, your daily amount, just as when you had straw. Moreover, the foremen of the sons of Israel, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and were asked, Why have you not completed your required amount either yesterday or today in making brick as previously?
Now let's bear in mind, these people that were foremen that were set over these Israelites to make brick, they were Israelites. The problem is they had taskmasters over them that were beating them, saying, you're not getting your people to work enough. We're going to make you even go out and gather your own stubble to make brick. What they're basically saying, the taskmasters are asking them to, hey, pick it up. You've got to pick up the work. So we see the hard labor that the Egyptians were placing on the Israelites. And now let's move forward to 15 through 19, please.
Then the foreman of the sons of Israel came and cried out to Pharaoh, saying, Why do you deal this way with your servants? There is no straw given to your servants, yet they keep saying to us, Make bricks. And behold, your servants are being beaten. But it is the fault of your own people. But he said, You are lazy, very lazy. Therefore you say, Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. So go now and work, for you shall be given no straw, yet you must deliver the quota of bricks. And the foreman of the sons of Israel saw that they were in trouble, because they were told, You must not reduce your daily amount of bricks.
So why did Pharaoh say that they were lazy? He's saying, if you have time to ask to go out and sacrifice, then you've got time to make extra brick. how lazy of you to even ask to leave and go and be able to worship. So if you've got time to do that, you've got time to do this. It's interesting that we see the people come to Pharaoh and say, thy servants. That terminology is used 3 times. And they were the servants. We don't know if it was done out of respect or what, but I think it's interesting that did no good. We can see now how the common Hebrew man was being treated terribly by the Egyptians. And again, all this time, God is looking down and seeing how his people are being treated. Bear that in mind. Verse 20 and 21.
When they left Pharaoh's presence, they met Moses and Aaron as they were waiting for them. And they said to them, may the Lord look upon you and judge you, for you have made us odious in Pharaoh's sight and in the sight of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to kill us.
Verse 21, I'm going to read it again. And they said unto them, the Lord look upon you and judge, because ye have made our Savior to be abhorred in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants. What a metaphor. Do you smell with your eyes? He's saying, what you've done to us is you've made Pharaoh smell of us like we stink. He's using his eyes as the metaphor saying that, but he's saying you're making it so much harder on us than before. And we're going to start seeing the Israelite people started caving in a little bit and making more excuses about that. Who is the they there in verse 20 is obviously the Hebrew leaders that were chosen to make the Hebrews obey and work. Simply stated, these men were telling Moses and Aaron, you're making us stink in the nostrils of Pharaoh, which is obviously not a good thing. Verses 22 and 23, we'll finish that chapter up. 22 and 23.
Then Moses returned to the Lord and said, O Lord, why hast thou brought harm to this people? Why didst thou ever send me? Ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in thy name, he has done harm to this people, and thou hast not delivered thy people at all.
What was the state of Moses right now? Anybody?
Discouraged.
Pardon me?
Discouraged.
Very discouraged. I think we could use a lot of words. Discouraged, confused, aggravated, maybe a little angry with God. The chore that he has to set aside to do for these people is just overwhelming. What he had done is he brought more pain and work on the people that he was trying to help, according to Moses. He made it harder on them. He just needed to vent to God, didn't he? And he did so, and he obviously got an answer from God. Now here's the positive in this. He went straight to God with the problem, not to somebody else. We should do the same thing in times of confusion in our lives. Do we have the right to vent to God like Moses did? I think we do, don't we? We have trials of life that come upon us and we don't understand, and we may not physically hit our knees, but mentally we hit our knees and we question things at times, and we vent to God. And I think that's okay. He's our Father. He is the person we go to when we are frustrated, and He does answer the prayers that we set before Him. Anything else in chapter 5? Yes, ma'am. Let me get a mic to Miss Nancy.
In verse 17, it talks about,
Go ahead and read it, Miss Nancy.
it says, you are idle. That is why you say, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. So what they were saying is, because you want to go and worship God, you're idle. So we're going to put more work on you. You don't need to be going anywhere. So, I guess that was the reason. If they hadn't been wanting to worship God, he probably wouldn't have made them. I mean, I would think that he wouldn't have made them have more work put on them.
Right.
So because they wanted to go worship God and sacrifice, he decided that they needed more work to do. That way they wouldn't be idle. He called that idle.
Right. Okay. Chapter 6. Now, based on the last chapter, again, this is, hold on just a second, Jeff. based on the last verses of the last chapter, we can easily see that the people would also be very discouraged, right? And question and wonder what's going on. Again, it's so hard sometimes for us to remember they were just like us. Here I'm working hard anyway. I've got a loincloth on. I'm working in 110-degree temperature. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. And Moses and Aaron have come to me and they've said that you're going to be saved. I think they expected that relief to come quick, or quicker than it was happening, probably, because that's human nature. So bear that in mind when we go into this chapter. The people of Israel are very discouraged at this point. Yes, Jeff?
I figure while I had the mic, I'll make the comment. Them going out and worshiping was no small thing. You're talking about a lot of people, and they were going to go fairly far from where they were. So it would take a while for them to get out there and then do their sacrifice and then come back, right? If that was really the plan, but that it's no small thing. So I think trying to put myself in Pharaoh's position, it might be asking, can we take a month break or so, or even longer? I don't know how long that would take, but it's not like us hopping in the car and driving over here in the morning. It was going to be a big thing, and I think that's why Pharaoh was thinking, well, if you've got that much time on your hands, like you mentioned, then, you don't have enough to do.
Yeah. I think originally they had asked for 3 days to go out and worship.
Oh, was it 3 days?
I believe at the very begining, the first request was 3 days.
Okay.
I may be wrong about that.
Well, then I retract what I've said.
But regardless, regardless, it would be, and we talked about why couldn't they sacrifice, why couldn't they do the sacrifices there? It's because it would be considered very heathen, because the very animals that the Egyptians worshipped is what they would have to use for the sacrifices. So, okay, let's read chapter 7, or excuse me, 6. Let's read just verse 1.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For under compulsion he shall let them go, and under compulsion he shall drive them out of his land."
So this is a continuation, I think, of the conversation before as well. How long did it take for God to address Moses' concern? It seems that it was very quickly, does it not? The concern has been set before him. Now God says, in verse 1, read 1 again, if you don't mind, Brian.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For under compulsion he shall let them go, and under compulsion he shall drive them out of his land."
What would have been hard for Moses to understand about what God just said? It'd be hard enough to understand that Pharaoh was going to let the people go. But what was the terminology that was used here? They're going to drive them out. Pharaoh's going to drive the people out. They're not going to have to sneak out in the middle of the night. It's not going to take military means to get out. It's not going to be another nation coming over and taking over Egypt and you'll be able to slip out. No, he's going to force you out. He's going to drive you out. He's going to want you to leave. And we talked about last week, you're even going to be able to get riches. They're going to give you stuff just to get rid of you. And that's got to be hard for Moses to believe and understand at this point, I would think. Verses 2 and 3. Oh, back to Jeff.
I'll try to make up for that last one. I'm studying the Gospel of John right now, and several times in that Gospel, it says that the Jews wanted to take hold of Christ and kill him. It says, but they could not because Jesus' time had not yet come. So we read that several times through John. And I think when you mentioned Moses and his frustration with God, asking, well, why have you not let these people go yet? Look at what Pharaoh's doing. And I mentioned before, if you read Exodus and then read Matthew after that, you'll see a lot of parallels between Moses and Christ, and even over into John as well. And I was thinking that where God, it wasn't, the time had not come to let them go, right? That was the thing. It was, God was not, like you just mentioned, God was not only going to let them go, he was going to force them out, right? And before that, there were going to be a whole bunch of miracles, to prove who God is. So Anyway, that's what came to mind when you mentioned Moses being frustrated with God, is, well, it's not his time yet. You know, it's not God's time. He has his own timetable.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about why there were 10 plagues, and that kind of will enter into that. 2 and 3, Brian.
God spoke further to Moses and said to him, I am the Lord, and I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, Lord, I did not make myself known to them.
I think that we need to reverse the way this statement is made, because certainly there are people that did know him by the name Jehovah. Genesis 15:7, Abraham did. Genesis 26:2, Isaac did. So I think the way it is written needs to be punctuated differently, and it actually should have been read, but by my name Jehovah was I not known to them, as opposed to the statement the way it's written by the way it was translated. Does that make sense, though? Because he had certainly been known to them as Jehovah. Read 4 and 5, please.
And I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they sojourned. And furthermore, I have heard the groaning of the sons of Israel, because the Egyptians are holding them in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant.
He hadn't forgotten anything. Because he said to Moses, he reiterated, I have established, I have heard, I have remembered. All those things he needed to remind and reiterate to Moses that, hey, nothing's changed. I haven't forgotten anything. 6 through 8.
Say therefore to the sons of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from their bondage. I will also redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. Then I will take you for my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. And I will bring you to the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you for a possession. I am the Lord.
So who's giving the instructions here, and who's he giving it to? Who's giving the instructions here? God is. And who's he giving the instructions to? And then who's Moses supposed to relay that to? Exactly. He tells them exactly what to be told to the Israelite people right now in these few verses. Verse 9, Brian.
So Moses spoke thus to the sons of Israel, but they did not listen to Moses on account of their despondency and cruel bondage.
Okay, here we go again. Now, who's the speaker? And who's he speaking to? Moses is speaking to who? To the people. Do they believe him? No, think about what just happened. They've been added more work to do. It said they hearkened not unto Moses. And that's not hard for us to understand, I wouldn't think. They've been totally crushed and frustrated. Their burdens had been increased almost to an intolerable amount. Before this, at least they didn't have to gather their own straw. It was hard, but at least it wasn't that bad. Moses again uses the excuse. Here's what it says it uses the word cruel bondage, which obviously to us spells out hopelessness and helplessness to the nth degree. So the people now, they didn't hearken to what Moses was saying. Verse 9.
So Moses...
I'm sorry. We've already read 9, right?
10.
Let's go 10 through 13.
David.
Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Go, tell Pharaoh king of Egypt to let the sons of Israel go out of his land. But Moses spoke before the Lord, saying, Behold, the sons of Israel have not listened to me. How then will Pharaoh listen to me? For I am unskilled in speech. Did you say through 13?
Yes.
Then the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, and gave them a charge to the sons of Israel and to Pharaoh the king of Egypt, to bring the sons of Israel out of the land of Egypt.
So now the stakes are increased, because not only is he, is he supposed, just one second, Nancy. Not only is he supposed to go he was going to the people. Now who's he asked to go before? Pharaoh. What a task to go now before Pharaoh. And now at this time, he's not asking them just to go for only 3 days to sacrifice. No, he's saying, let them go. And I think we could say that emphatically. Let my people go. But Moses, once again, as human would be, he makes excuse. He says, if my people won't listen to me, how in the world do you think Pharaoh will listen to me? It's not going to happen. And then he uses the words unskilled. The King James Version used the words uncircumcised. I have uncircumcised lips. Remember what his concern was originally? What did he say? I can't talk. What did God do? I'll give you who? Aaron. Moses says, I have unskilled lips. In other words, I'm inefficient for the purpose that you've requested me to take care of. We'll discuss God's answer to this over in chapter 7. And in verse 13 is like a summary. The preliminaries have been observed, the characters have been introduced, and action is about to begin. So read 13 one more time, then I'll go to Miss Nancy.
Then the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, and gave them a charge to the sons of Israel and to Pharaoh king of Egypt, to bring the sons of Israel out of the land of Egypt.
That's what's getting ready to happen. That's kind of a summary of what we've been talking about for the last few chapters. Miss Nancy.
I always like to think about this in the terms of us also, where we live today, and not necessarily here in Murfreesboro, but the time period we're living in. And it says in verse 9, let me see what it was. Verse 9, it says, Moses spoke to the people, but they didn't listen to him because of their broken spirit and their harsh slavery. You know, we have a broken spirit sometime. And you know, most of the time when people are down in the dumps and they don't know what they're going to do next, they forget about God. I don't know why they do, but they do. So, you know, we can take this. God was with those people. If he would only listen, they would only listen to him. And that's the way it is with us today. God is with us if we'll only study and listen to what he's got to say to us.
I agree. Totally. I think the major difference between us and them is that we have not been enslaved. So it'd be even harder probably for them to quite comprehend and understand what's going to happen. But anyway, okay, did somebody else? Jeff, did you have a comment? Okay. 14 through 27, we're not going to go through all the genealogies. You thank me later, Brian. I told you when we started to study that I didn't think it would serve any good purpose to read certain parts of it, so we're not going to. Let me just mention this. This genealogy introduces a great many characters who appear in future chapters of the Pentateuch. It is selective and it's abbreviated, and it only covers 4, not 10 generations. 4 generations could not have covered the 430 years of bondage. There's all kind of speculation as to why only 4 generations are listed here, but they're all conceived by man, so there's no sense in me going there. Does anybody want to say anything about these? There are some names there that you're going to recognize, but is anything that we can add to benefit the class from 14 to 27 that any comments might be made?
Hey, David,
Yes, sir.
not about the genealogies, but I think one thing that we need to keep in mind through all this is the Hebrews had been there for 400 plus years, and we see later on as they are leaving Egypt, it says that there were 600,000 men of fighting age. Estimates have put the total population 2+ million people. That's the city of Chicago. Keep that in mind. It kind of gives us an idea of the order of magnitude, the scale of what we're talking about here. 2.5 million people enslaved by Egypt at this time.
Yeah, it is difficult to comprehend, isn't it, Robert? Good point. Anybody else before we go into chapter 7? Yes, sir.
I was just wondering when it makes reference to the Lord speaking, if this is not Jesus speaking on behalf of God to Moses.
Could you reference a verse for me?
all through this, it talks about the Lord spoke, but I'm thinking maybe it's Jesus speaking. Jesus is present here in this, is that a stretch or somebody's thoughts on that? I'm thinking that Jesus is speaking on behalf of God versus like Aaron speaks on behalf of Moses or Moses for God.
Yeah, we kind of had that discussion a few weeks ago. Jeff
I missed
McGee had mentioned the fact that he felt like it was possibly Jesus in the burning bush. There were people that agreed, some disagreed. We decided at the end of the day just to agree to disagree.
Well, Jesus is throughout the Old Testament. We
Sure.
know that. He's in every book.
Sure.
It's just recognizing him.
Right. Anybody have any comments on? Anybody? Okay. Chapter 7. Preparations have now been completed, and now we're going to see the delivery of the Israelites. Just an overview of what we're going to get ready to talk about. The first 7 verses will be the overview of the entire operation itself. Verses 8 through 13 is the revealing of the first plague. Verses 14 through 19 is when the plague is threatened in great detail. And 20 through 25 is when the plague is executed. So we're going to see a lot of things happen before we actually see the water turn to blood in this chapter. Verses 1 through 2, please, Brian.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "See, I make you as God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall speak to Pharaoh that he let the sons of Israel go out of his land."
Now, Moses should now not feel inferior to Pharaoh. We have to believe his confidence has to be more than it was. So the contrast between the first confrontation is drastic. The first confrontation, he asked for what? How many days? 3 days. Let my people go for 3 days, and now that opportunity has gone by for Pharaoh. Now he's just going to say, I want you to let my people go. Pharaoh was insulting and accused them of being liars. And it says here also that Aaron would be his prophet, which means he'd be speaking on behalf of him. He would be speaking on behalf of God and not his own words. Throughout all the 10 plagues, Aaron's the one that spoke, and he acted for Moses. At this point, these two men were really a good, godly joined pair, and they were working directly with and for what God was wanting them to do. Verses 3 through 5.
"But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that I may multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. When Pharaoh will not listen to you, then I will lay my hand on Egypt and bring out my hosts, my people, the sons of Israel, from the land of Egypt by great judgments."
Okay, let's get the context real good. I really want to make sure we keep the context. Who's speaking here? God's speaking. Who's he speaking to? Remember, first 7 verses, an overview of the entire operation. How would Moses know what the operation is unless God revealed it to him? So that's what's happening right now. God's talking to Moses and telling him what's getting ready to take place. The mention of hardening does not mean that God would harden his heart at the beginning of these events, but the hardening executed upon him by God would be the final result from the actions of God and the non-response of Pharaoh. We talked a lot about the hardening of hearts a few weeks ago, so we won't go back into that unless somebody just wants to. The fact is, what we read in verses 1 through 7 is a prophetic summary of the next 7 chapters also, because the next 7 chapters are going to cover a lot of the delivery of the people from Egypt. Let's read verses 6 and 7.
Okay, I'll catch up with verse 5. I don't think we read that.
Oh, did you not? Okay.
"And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I stretch out my hand on Egypt and bring out the sons of Israel from their midst." So Moses and Aaron did it, as the Lord commanded them. Thus they did. And Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron 83, when they spoke to Pharaoh.
So it's really encouraging to us as Christians to know that now the leaders of the people that God wanted delivered. It says here that in verse 6, they did so as Jehovah commanded them. They're on board. It's complete and perfect obedience now at this point. Why are the ages given, do you think? How old was Moses here? How old was Aaron? 83. Why do you think the ages would be given now? Any thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
It's encouraging to see that these weren't young men that were trying to, or that were standing before Pharaoh. These were aged men. And, you know, when I think about 20 years older than me, it's like, wow, and you can't do X, Y, or Z, but you've got these examples.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Matter of fact, it kind of followed my notes. I put both Moses and Aaron were past the age when such exploits could have been undertaken by men without supernatural help. So it wasn't a young warrior that looked like Hercules that could do something on their own. God chose, I won't use the word frail, but an 80-year-old man, 83-year-old man to do what? To show it's God's power. It's not the power coming through the men. I think that has a lot to do with it. It coincides with what she's saying. I'm reminded of sermons preached about the common man and why he is sometimes chosen, and that's to show the power of God and not of men. Yes, David?
I think we need to think, too, that Pharaoh was a young man. So them going up against him, like you just said, though, it shows that age and God was on their side.
Very valid point. We know he was younger because he had well, I take it back. I better be careful what I say. He had a firstborn. We don't know if he was a baby or not, but yes, ma'am. Miss Nancy right here.
I guess we could say, look around us here. How many 80-year-old people do we have in here? Hey, I'm already past that. So, you know, what can you
Miss
do?
Nancy, you don't look a day over 100.
Well, I sure feel it. But what can we do when we're older? We think, you know, I think, especially since we had that wreck, I can't do what I used to do. I really can't. And, you know, and I see him out there in the yard working. I believe he could work till he's 109. But, you know, being 83, almost 84, we are. And how many people in here at 80 years old and some older?
You think people are going to respond to that, Miss Nancy?
No. But, you know, you got to think of that. These men were old. And look what God was putting on them. So what about us? What does God think about us? What do we need to be doing? As long as we can do it, we should do it.
Right. Very good. Verses 8 and 9, Brian.
Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, When Pharaoh speaks to you, saying, Work a miracle, then you shall say to Aaron, Take your staff and throw it down before Pharaoh, that it may become a serpent.
Okay. In verse 10, really the action is getting ready to begin. So let's read just verse 10 by itself, please.
So Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh, and thus they did just as the Lord had commanded. And Aaron threw his staff down before Pharaoh and his servants, and it became a serpent.
What's kind of interesting here is if you take a look at when it says it became a serpent, oddly enough, the word here actually is translated crocodile, which I found to be really interesting. It's a different word from the one found in chapter 4, verse 3, when God was showing Aaron and Moses what would happen if they threw the rod down. Supposedly, according to the translations, I don't know Hebrew, I don't know Greek. If anybody does, they can correct me. But it appeared that maybe that staff might have been larger than the snake. And evidently God had anticipated the actions of the magicians, and so the rod became a much larger animal, which would be large enough to swallow all the serpents their rods could produce. Take that for what it's worth. That's kind of what I had found. Verses 11 and 12.
Then Pharaoh also called for the wise men and the sorcerers, and they also, the magicians of Egypt, did the same with their secret arts. For each one threw down his staff, and they turned into serpents. But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs.
So how useful would a magician be to Pharaoh if he couldn't perform magic? It wouldn't. So how much pressure was on these magicians to show up the God of Moses and Aaron? I would say pretty intense. Put your feet now in the magician's feet. They've got to try to reenact what's already been done by someone that comes from the true and living God. And according to this, the magicians were able to mimic it. Now, I've also read, and some of you may or may not agree with this, but we don't know for sure how they were able to mimic it, but there are some thoughts. Supposedly, by pressing the nape of the neck of a snake, it throws them to the state of paralysis, and that renders them stiff and immovable, thus seeming to change into rods. I don't think I'll ever try that, but that's what supposedly happens at times. Any comments? We see not just a rod, but rods plural. They cast down every man his rod, so there's probably more than one magician there. It's not important to know how they did it, but what happened to them, which was Aaron's rod swallowed them all up. Paul tells us the name of these magicians, which I think was also interesting. Over in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 8, the name of these magicians was Jannes and Jambres. Isn't it interesting that God felt it important through his inspired word to tie things together, to broaden our faith, to say not only did this happen, but here's the names of the people that were there. I think that's interesting. Yes, Jim?
I was just thinking, would this be, could that be God allowing those magicians to perform that kind of a trick, I guess if we could say, in order for, Aaron's rod to eat or kill the serpents of the magicians? Did he allow it? Or and this one may be stretching a little bit, but I wonder if it was Satan who was able to cause these magicians to do this kind of a trick, but God's serpent, ate theirs. So I wonder if there's something like that going on as well, and not just a magic trick like, we would see today. I'm sure God had to allow that to happen, but I just wondered, how much did he allow that
Well,
to happen?
if any of you ever been to a magic show, you realize that it blows your mind if you go to one that's really professionally done. So these magicians, probably with or without help, could possibly do these things. I don't know. Verse 13.
Yet Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord had said.
Surprised? Anybody surprised? No. Why should he be? His magicians were able to mimic exactly what Moses and Aaron were able to do, and they said that their God was more powerful. And right now, at this point, he didn't agree with that. He thinks all their gods are just as important. And boy, he's going to find out different during the plagues. Verses 14 through 17.
Then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is stubborn. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he is going out to the water, and station yourself to meet him on the bank of the Nile. And you shall take in your hand the staff that was turned into a serpent. And you will say to him, The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to you, saying, Let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. But behold, you have not listened until now. Thus says the Lord, By this you shall know that I am the Lord. Behold, I will strike the water that is in the Nile with the staff that is in my hand, and it shall be turned into blood.
So is Moses still standing in front of Pharaoh at this point, through this reading? He's not, is he? No, he's not now. Why? Because we know that now God's talking to him, revealing information to him. So now the setting has changed. He's no longer standing in front of Pharaoh. All the things have been done with the rods. So now what? Let's get a look. Let's kind of get an overview of the plagues. Just FYI, the ones that are numbered, 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8, they were announced to Pharaoh beforehand. The others were not. They just happened. 1, 2, and 3 affected both the Israelites and the Egyptians. And then 4 through 10 affected only only the Egyptians themselves. Read verse 18, please.
And the fish that are in the Nile will die, and the Nile will become foul, and the Egyptians will find difficulty in drinking water from the Nile.
Now, Miss Peggy, I'm sure, can answer this question as well or better than anybody. And that's how bad does a fish stink once it's beginning to rot? But can you imagine the stench that would come from all the fish in that river? The first three affected both the Egyptians and Israelites. 6 of the plagues were introduced to Pharaoh prior to the plague beginning as a warning. All affected the Egyptians in a personal way, showing the weakness of their gods. And again, just a little bit of an overview of the plagues itself. And there's a list of them right there that we'll be talking about. Water to blood, frogs, lice, flies, cattle disease, boils, hell and fire, locusts, darkness, and death. Wow. God means business, doesn't he? Jeff.
Hey, Brother David, I was just going to say, if you've ever been around somebody who's bleeding or something, real bad, kind of like that, that blood smells bad as well. So it could be that blood and the fish and all of that together would smell really bad.
Okay. Let's go ahead and we'll try to get through a few more verses. Let's go 19 through 25, and this is the first plague. Bear in mind, this context is the river water turning to blood. So verses 19 through 25, Brian.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Say to Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over their rivers, over their streams, and over their pools, and over all their reservoirs of water, that they may become blood. And there shall be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in vessels of wood and in vessels of stone." So Moses and Aaron did even as the Lord had commanded, and he lifted up the staff and struck the water that was in the Nile, in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants. And all the water that was in the Nile was turned to blood. And the fish that were in the Nile died, and the Nile became foul, so that the Egyptians could not drink water from the Nile. And the blood was through all the land of Egypt. But the magicians of Egypt did the same with their secret arts. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord had said. Then Pharaoh turned and went into his house with no concern even for this. So all the Egyptians dug around the Nile for water to drink, for they could not drink of the water of the Nile. And 7 days passed after the Lord had struck the Nile.
Now remember, this would not only be a terrible thing about the water, but also it's an insult because they worship that river. How could their God turn against them like this and not allow the water to be drunk? In verse 19, notice that there's no usable water to be found anywhere. It's not just the river, but all water was affected. And it happened just as God told Moses and Aaron that it would happen. It's just hard to comprehend how someone could be as callous, selfish, and irrational as Pharaoh was when he sees this going on. I find it interesting in verse 22. We already know that Moses and Aaron and God, they've already turned all the water in that area to blood. So when it says in verse 22 that the Egyptians were able to mimic it, if Pharaoh, did he actually tell his magicians, okay, show them, turn some more water to blood? The foolishness of Pharaoh, if that's what happened, because it says in that verse, and the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments. Why would they do that? I find that to be really, really interesting. Now here's where it gets down to the personal note. We'll end with this. Well, a lot of fathers in the room, grandfathers in the room. Now put yourself in the shoes of these men who love their wives and their children and their siblings and their parents, and you are trying with all of your means to find water to satisfy the thirst if you're a young father of your infant child or your aged mother or father. That's where we put the roots down as to what's happening in Egypt, is what is happening and affecting these men and women and children during this time. Obviously, Pharaoh cared nothing about his people. Only his foolish pride and power were in his mind at this time. We'll pick up next week with chapter 8, 2 weeks. Chapter 8, thank you for your comments, and if you're visiting, we're sure glad that you're here.